The evidence is on the website. And I said, well, I just looked at the website yesterday and I didn't see it.
You just cause trouble everywhere you go, Phil.
Enlightenment.
I'm just asking her to be factual and say, it's a possibility.
Yeah. Oh, man. Are we ready or should we wait a few more minutes?
Well, we can start.
It's 10 minutes to sit down, all right.
It's 10 till 6.
Yeah.
I got 4:05. We can wait a few more minutes.
We'll wait 5 more minutes and hopefully other people will show up.
And here they come. Here comes my favorite author. Hello, Sharon McCrum.
Have you all?
We got lost in New
Good to see you, man.
And the stoplight.
I'm a fan.
Sharon and I go way back. Sharon was a teacher at Tech when I was at Tech. Would you teach creative writing or Appalachian Studies or both, or do you remember?
You taught both.
You taught both? She taught both?
Both. Yes, if you taught that.
What year was that?
That was probably 81, 82.
We're gone then.
But she got me interested in Appalachian Studies because of her book. And what was Jane Spear? Was that the gal who taught Appalachian Studies? Jane Spear? Was that her name? I think that was her name. But she was there, and that's when I started reading Sharon. Started off with things like Bimbos of the Death Sun. And then I fell madly in love with Elizabeth McPherson, which is still a touchy point between us. Anyway, I'm really glad to see y'all, both of you. Last time I saw you were at the home place eating fried chicken like it was no tomorrow.
Can't do that anymore. Can't do that anymore.
Yeah. But so anyway, I invited Sharon to come. She lives pretty close to us here.
Excellent.
And she brought the guy with the hat with her. You think he's Indiana Jones, but he's really not.
He's really security, right?
Yeah. It's like David Browning, the Mayberry deputy. Whenever he shows up at something, we have extra security tonight. He's Marty Five. I think he's a little meaner than David. I'm not sure.
He's the bloodhound of the law.
Yeah. Anyway, thank y'all for coming. That's really nice. How about now, Phil? You think we're okay?
Go ahead and start.
We're going to start. This is unusual. Usually I'm listening to her talk. I think it's probably the first time I've ever got her to listen to me talk. So if she jumps up and runs out screaming, you'll know why. So, Sharon, we're going to talk about murder today. And we're going to talk about 3 specific cases from my book here, Murder in Rearview Mirror. As I was telling them, that's the Sidney Allen house. They're restoring it up there in Hillsville now. It's owned by the Historic Society. They, like I said, I think they probably put about $250,000 into this house. P. Buckley Moss has done paintings for it. I've done, I give a cut off my books for it. So they're really working. I always wanted to write a murder book. You know, I write Civil War books mostly. And when I'm not publishing the Songcatcher for her,
Right.
yeah, that allows me to brag that I've published a New York Times best-selling book, even though I really haven't. But so anyway, for years I always wanted to do a murder book, and I was sitting with Jennifer Gregory, whose children's books I publish. We were sitting at Hungry Mother or somewhere at a festival, and Jennifer says to me, "Oh, that's great. I saw a murder once." I said, "You saw a murder once?" She says, "Yeah, I saw a murder once. I was over in Collinsville at the stoplight at the Dollar General Market, and I looked up in my rearview mirror, and I saw a man walk across the parking lot and kill his wife right behind me in her car. I saw a murder in a rearview mirror."
What a title.
So it has 2 meanings. It means looking into the past, and it's literally Jennifer seeing a murder. I said to her, Jennifer is about 6 foot tall, got Robert Plant's 1970s hair. You can all imagine that. And she, I think, really runs Henry County, but she's the administrative assistant for the county administrator, which means she probably really runs Henry County. So I said to her, I said, well, what'd you do? She said, well, Tom, I got the hell out of there. What do you think I did?
She's a witness.
She's a witness. The dude didn't run. He stayed right there and waited for the cops. He and his wife had been having disagreements, and he literally shot her with their child in the car.
Oh, dear Lord.
But didn't shoot the child, just shot the mother.
Oh, that's all.
And Jennifer witnesses this whole thing in her rearview mirror. And so that's where the title comes from for this book. This book is all about murders along the Virginia-North Carolina border. So it's some in North Carolina, some in Virginia. The Hillsville Shootout. And like I said, we're going to talk about 3 today. One's in North Carolina, one's in Virginia, and one's in both. And we'll figure that out in a minute. But I wanted to do a book. Each chapter is a different murder story. So everything, for a minute I thought there was a B. It's the sea moon up there. Every chapter is a different story, including things like the Lynch Hollow Murder, which is kind of famous up here in this part of the world. Under the Trestle by Ron Peterson. I also published a book by Woody Luckabille, who was one of the lawyers in that case. And every time Ron does a book signing, I sell lots more Woody's books. So Ron's coming to the library in Radford on Thursday, and I'm thinking about going up there and kissing him because he's made me so much money for that book. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. October 1929, of course, the stock market crashes, and Charlie Lawson, shown here, is a farmer in Walnut Cove, North Carolina. He has a wife, Fanny, who's about 37, and he has Arthur. I have to read this, I never can remember this. He has Arthur, a son, 19, Marie, a daughter, 17, Carrie, a daughter, 12, Maybelle, 7, Jane, 4, Raymond, 2, and Mary Lou, 4.5 months. And he farms tobacco. Well, sometime there's 2 theories about what's about to happen here. One is that Charlie accidentally got hit in the head while he was working on the farm and digging a drainage ditch, of all things. And apparently his behavior began to change. He began to talk to himself and wander about. And he would say things like, and I'm quoting him directly, "I wouldn't mind dying if I could take my whole family with me." He gets in fights with people at tobacco warehouses. He gets in a fight with his oldest son, Arthur, who you'll see in a minute is a pretty big dude who you probably don't want to mess with. He complains about not being able to sleep. And he says, "The misery in my head is so bad I just can't stand it." 2 weeks before Christmas, 1929, this is their cabin in Walnut Cove. Charlie takes the whole family to the big city of Winston and Salem, hyphen. He buys them all a new suit of clothes and gets their picture made. And this is their Christmas present. They get a picture made and they get a new set of clothes. And here they all are. Arthur is the big dude there on the left. You see, he's not a man to mess with. And Charlie ain't near as big as his son, and there they all are. Now, this is 2 weeks before Christmas, and Charlie has got a plan, apparently. On Christmas Day, 1929, Arthur goes off hunting with his cousins and leaves the rest of the family at the house. Carrie and Maybelle, 2 of his younger daughters, are walking up toward the tobacco barn, and he gets them near the barn, and Charlie shoots both of them. Puts them in the tobacco barn, poses them in the tobacco barn. He goes into the house where he's going to kill Fanny, his wife, first, and then his sons, James and Raymond, who are hiding respectively under a bed and under a wood stove. He's going to take his rifle, the butt of his rifle, and kill the baby. He then poses Fanny, like he did the daughters in the barn. And Charlie then will go up into a thicket up near the tobacco barn and hide. Arthur will come home a little while later, and upon seeing all this, will collapse on the front porch because he's just seen his whole family murdered. And of course, they don't know who or what or where. Charlie is nowhere to be seen. Charlie then will wait, the sheriff will come, all kinds of people will come, and then a single shot will ring out from behind the barn where Charlie kills himself. And there's the barn, there's the interior of the house, and there's the graves of all the Lawson family. The family all buried on December 27th in the Broder Cemetery there in Stokes County. And Arthur, who's left with the mortgage on the place and having to do stuff, his uncles kind of take over. And well, what do? Well, they open the house for tourists.
Oh,
And they start raising money
oh.
to pay off the mortgage using the murder as a draw. Yeah. It gets even more macabre, as you might imagine. This thing becomes so famous that reportedly even John Dillinger showed up and wanted to see this play. Marie, the daughter, had made a cake that morning, and people started picking the raisins off the cake as souvenirs and taking them home with them. They had to put the cake under glass to keep people from doing that. And this becomes the Bloody Christmas, the Lawson family murders in Stokes County, North Carolina. And there's been 2 books by Trudy Smith about this. There's a chapter about it in my book. It's very famous or infamous down there in Stokes County. Stokes County is between like Stewart and Winston-Salem and Greensboro. It's just a little bit east of Surrey County. So anyway, all the buildings are gone now. All the remnants of this place have long been destroyed or burned. Arthur will live until 1945, and he gets killed in a truck accident, and he's the last one of the family. Charlie reportedly wrote on the back of a tobacco warehouse receipt before all this happened. He said, "Blame no one but I." So there we go. Now, any of you paying attention, this building's been in the news lately. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. In 1936, Mount Airy, North Carolina, Andy Griffith is just a little baby then, a little boy. He's about 7, 9, something like that. Mount Airy is known for something else. It's known to be Little Chicago. You don't think about Mayberry being a crime-ridden place. We have extra security tonight, but it is. Mount Airy is a pretty rough place. It was a rough place when I was growing up if you knew where to look or where not to look. In 1936, the Main Oak Emporium had a dentist's office. If you went up the stairs on the left side by Dr. Richard Heggie. Dr. Heggie was married to Alice, and they lived down where Cherry and Main Street are in kind of a hacienda, Spanish-style house. Well, his office was here in this building, and Dr. Heggie had a problem. He was in love with his receptionist. Her name was Elsie Dickerson Sammons, and, quote, "she was pretty enough to make you forget about going to the dentist." Now, that must have been a beautiful woman. Well, Elsie has the gall to fall in love with another man and marries him and moves out of Mount Airy, moves all the way to the eastern shore of Virginia to St. Charles. Well, Dr. Heggie, doing the, quote, strongly objected to her getting married, was the quote he's most famous for. They got married on June the 10th and started off living way out on the eastern shore. Well, Dr. Heggie, practicing the time immemorial, "if I can't have you, nobody will," Dr. Heggie becomes one of the very first people to send a bomb through the mail.
Whoa.
This is Elsie, pretty enough to make you forget you're going to the dentist. This is her husband's home. She married a man named Curry Thomas, and In July the 22nd, they went to the post office in St. Charles, Virginia, picked up a package that they thought was probably a wedding gift or something. They took it home to the Hermitage, they called it. It was supposedly built in the 1780s. I went out to the Eastern Shore when I was writing this book. We found this house and found Curry's nephew, who was still alive, and he told me everything about it, like he had actually been there, what I'm about to describe to you. Well, they get home, Elsie starts to get out of the car, opens her door, which probably saved her life, and her husband opens the package. Well, as soon as he does this, he goes off and kills him instantly and knocks her halfway across the yard with the force of the explosion. Dr. Heggie, that day, was reportedly on the New River fishing, not knowing that he was the Unabomber before there was a Unabomber. They buried Curry, shown here, 2 days later, and the postmaster in St. Charles is a little upset about all of this, as you might imagine. And of course, you blow up somebody using the postal service, that's federal. And they tended not to look too kindly on this sort of thing. So the postmaster notifies the postal inspectors, and 3 months of investigation begin. They find the label from the battery, they found the mousetrap device, and the mailing label of this bomb. Well, I didn't realize this myself, but batteries can be traced. This battery that handled this device apparently was manufactured in Canada. It was sold to a company in Cleveland, and it was shipped to North Carolina to a hardware store, which was in the Main Oak Emporium in Mount Airy, North Carolina. He went downstairs and bought the parts to his bomb in the same building that he worked in. The mailing label, apparently, back then, a typewriter is like a fingerprint. If you find the typewriter, you can match it up. And that's what they did. Dr. Heggie apparently had also purchased batteries, pipes, strings, and all sorts of things to make his bomb. Dr. Heggie is, I said he was on both sides of the state line, remember? He's in North Carolina, so they trick you. They get him to come up to Galax, Virginia, where, you know, they have the big Fiddlers Convention and all that sort of thing. And they snare him with a woman and catch him in Virginia so they don't have to do all the, you know, expediting across the lines and all that kind of thing. And they carry him to St. Charles, Virginia, where Dr. Heggie immediately tries to kill himself. He fails. They wait a few days, they send for his wife and his lawyer to come all the way from Mount Airy. Now, I don't know, today driving from Mount Airy to St. Charles, Virginia is just about an all-day job. I can't imagine what it would have been like in 1936. So, his wife, his lawyer come, they talk to him, they leave, and that very night, Dr. Heggie is successful and does kill himself by slitting his wrist using his glasses. Breaks his glasses and slits his wrist. So we never get to have a trial of the century or anything about this. Dr. Heggie is brought back to Mount Airy, and he is buried at the Grace Moravian Church in God's Acre. He's the very first grave in God's Acre because he's the one who gave him the land for the cemetery. Now, if you know anything about Grace Moravian Church, it's where Andy Griffith got his start. The preacher there was the only guy in town who could teach you to play a trombone, and Andy thought playing a trombone was the way to pick up girls. Yeah, he'd seen this movie, I guess. And that's true, he actually saw it in the movie. And so Dr. Heggie is buried in Grace Moravian's God's Acre in the cemetery that he himself donated to all of this. Now,
What happened to the girlfriend?
she survived, married, and moved to Texas. Lived happily ever after, as far as I know. Nobody else tried to blow her up.
Did he send her any kind of letter or note or anything?
No, he was really against the marriage when she was still working for him. And, you know, that's how they kind of figured out that in him using the materials in the store down below his. Well, this week,
Oh, my
The
God.
Main Oak Emporium collapsed on Monday.
What?
Monday night, after the July 4th parade, the building collapsed.